into Jags AM. I'm Kainani Stevens here with Brian Sexton and John Oehser as we get ready for rookie minicamp a little later on in the week. But we do want to talk a little bit about some moves that have been made since last week. Our first big thing, number one, is the wide receiver room. At the beginning of last week's show, we told you about Zay Jones being released. And of course, you know Brian Thomas Jr. was that first round pick. So Brian, how different is this wide receiver room going to be this year with also the exit of Calvin Ridley?
I really can't speak to Ridley as much. Knowing Zay like I did and understanding the dynamic that existed between Kirk and Jones and the quarterback, I think it's going to be interesting to not have Jones there. He was one of those guys that you could always count on. I mean, it just seemed the most difficult throws. Jones was there. And I go back to that game-tying drive against the Cowboys when Trevor rolled out to his left and just knew right where to put the ball. There's just a chemistry that existed there. I don't think that the Ridley chemistry, ever even approached that. So now you've got Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, who's not in the receivers room, and you're going to try to integrate Brian Thomas. It's going to be a storyline to watch for sure, John.
Well, Zay was a guy when young and new receivers weren't quite sure what was going on, could look to him and he knew exactly where every receiver on the field was supposed to be regardless of position. Look, I said last week, I hoped against hope, I guess, that they would keep Zay. I liked covering him, I liked being around him, and I thought he gave you something. At the same time, when he was not healthy in 2023, he really wasn't there to give that to you. In the NFL, sometimes you got to move on. But will it look different? Yeah, but it's going to be a room where everybody outside the rookie really needs to be on the same page, and then they bring the rookie along, right?
Word to describe it was joy. I mean, this guy loved to come to work. He loved to be in the locker room around his teammates. Who's going to be that lighthearted guy? We don't know Brian Thomas's personality yet. Christian Kirk is a very low-key, serious performer. Who's going to be that guy that keeps it loose and fun, especially, Kai, in the fourth quarter when it's tight and a play needs to be made. Who's that guy? I guess we're going to find out.
Well, we do have Gabe Davis, and we know he can make some big plays as to what we've seen in Buffalo, so that's always an option. Our second big thing this week is rookie camp, because as we mentioned, John, I know this is your favorite time of year, but what can you take away from rookie camp when all the young guys come in and kind of see how things are laid out?
Nothing. And when I say that, I mean what's going on the field, sure. Whether this guy is beating this guy or catching touchdowns or anything away. What you don't want to see is guys where the scouts are coming off the field going, don't know about that one. And that doesn't happen very often anymore. But basically, this should be a week, is what I'm getting at, Brian, where you're just showing guys what it is, what the NFL is. Okay, we'll see you in a week when OTAs start. We'll go over this again, go over it again in training camp. This should be an initiation. And I don't think you want to read too much into it if some kid doesn't look quite ready yet.
It's practice for practice, Kai. I mean, this is where you're going to show these guys how you work and what the expectations are and just get them familiar with the schoolhouse, so to speak. It's kind of a first day of school experience for them. Know where the bathrooms are, know where the lunchroom is, understand where the locker room is, and the quickest way out to the field. There was a situation years ago where the Jaguars in 1997 drafted an offensive lineman out of Colorado State who, walking off the practice field, one very high-profile offensive lineman once was heard to say, "Who is that guy? He can't play at all." And you don't want that. You want everybody to look the part.
I can't imagine what lineman would have said that. I have
you might
a few
know him
ideas.
pretty well.
Maybe. Our final big thing today is going to be final additions. So because the draft is over, free agency obviously behind us, is this the roster set that we're going to look at? I'm sure if you talk to the GM, they'll say they're always looking for players. But Brian, do you think this is kind of the roster we're going to see going into the season?
Not with as much money as they've got under the salary cap. I don't think they're going to limit themselves. If there's somebody out there that makes sense, if there's someone that's cut during training camp, you'd have to look at very specific positions. And I think on the defensive side of the ball entirely, a cornerback or a pass rusher who can help that with Ryan Nielsen. If someone gets cut somewhere he's been along the way, Atlanta maybe, there would be a guy there. So I would say no. I think there's still a guy or two here that's going to come on and be a big-time contributor at some point this season.
Yeah, it's essentially the final roster, obviously. But as Brian said, Trent Baalke likes to leave room for one mid-season move, a trade deadline move, one way or the other. And I do think no matter what happens with Trevor Lawrence's contract later, with whatever contracts they still have to get done, they'll leave room to make at least one either mid-season or training camp acquisition.
They really have managed the salary cap exceedingly well. When they started this process of free agency, I wasn't sure, because of Josh Allen's contract, that they'd be able to be as aggressive as they were, and now to set themselves up with as much room as they've got, they've done a really good job with the cap this year.
Good to have options and that flexibility going into training camp and the season. Stay with us here on Jags AM. As we come back, we're going to look ahead and do our schedule predictions for the upcoming season.
I'm John Davis, Secretary of the Florida Lottery, and I'm proud to lead an agency that is creating brighter futures for Florida students, families, and communities. As the primary funding source of the Bright Future Scholarship Program, the lottery has helped nearly 1 million students reach their dream of a post-secondary education. And we will continue to do our part to ensure that every student across this state is aware of these opportunities and has the resources needed to succeed. Because together, we can build a brighter future for all.
Frank Frangie here. When you want barbecue in Jacksonville, you want Bono's Pit Barbecue. You can find Bono's locations all around town and on game day at Everbank Stadium, because Bono's is the official barbecue of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Over 70 years of authentic Southern Pit Barbecue. We are the local barbecue joint in BBQval for generations of people in Jacksonville. Go to bonosbarbecue.com to learn more, or call 904-880-8310 today. And remember, if you don't see a pit, it ain't legit.
The Jaguars bring performance, strength, and passion to every play. And you'll find the same when you bank with Everbank. Open an Everbank Performance Savings account and score serious savings. See what you could earn at everbank.com/Jaguars. Everbank, advantage you. Member FDIC and the official bank of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Move the freight. Move the freight. Magellan Transport voted the coolest office space in Jacksonville. You can apply online at www.magellanlogistics.com. Welcome back to Jags AM. As I mentioned, we're going to look ahead to the schedule. Now, the schedule usually comes out first to second week in May. We don't have an exact date for that just yet, but we do want to get ahead of things and kind of predict a little bit. We'll play predictor and try to figure out exactly what's going on. We're not always right, but we do try once in a while. So we all took our best guess at what we think some of the marquee dates on the schedule are going to be. We're going to start out with the season opener. We all have a theme here. It's not always true, but sometimes it is. We all stayed within the division for our season opener. I went with the Colts. I'm going to copy last year. I think it'll be home this time, though, one of our home games. But do you guys have any reasoning on why you picked yours, or just kind of going within the division?
I think that Texans-Jaguars rivalry is quietly, a budding marquee rivalry. It doesn't have the status yet because neither team has made a deep playoff run. But watching what C.J. Stroud did last year, and the division came down to the last game, and the rookie took it over the more veteran quarterback, I think the league would look at this game and say it would be a 4 o'clock game. I think it's in Houston, to be honest with you. And it could be something that could be really compelling.
Yeah, I agree with Brian about the Texans rivalry. I kind of just leaned the other way, that maybe they wouldn't put that as the opener because they think both games will be so important for the division race. Mm-hmm. But it can usually be the opener. I just kind of, in looking at this, you're really guessing on how they're going to think, sure, because a lot of times it comes down to whatever game's left. They're not actively thinking about how to do the Jaguars every day or do bad things to the Jaguars, which is what most fans will think on Thursday. So I went with Tennessee just because I think it'll be a division game. I think generally the league sort of likes putting division games in the opener when they can. They've done the Colts so often as the opener, and I don't think they'll do the Texans. So guess what? the Titans are the team that's left to take, so that's why I went that direction.
One other option. Let's look at some of what we predict for London. Obviously, last year they played 2 games there. We haven't had that confirmed. There is rumors, there's reports that there could be 2 games there this year. And if there are 2 games, we do know that one of those would be against the Bears. So we each have our predictions. If there are 2 games, that's what we're going with. The prediction that if there are 2, who we think the opponents would be. So, John, who did you have for yours?
Well, I went with the Bears.
Oh, you did?
And we should clarify, the reason that would be is when you look at the potential road games,
Sure.
there's really only one that could be in Chicago. So I went with chalk there.
Yep.
I went with Cleveland. I don't know why. I mean, one of the reports said the most likely were either Cleveland or New England.
Sure.
I went with Cleveland because it kind of feels like they would try to put what might be perceived as the better game over there. But that could be either one.
I know that they had a strong Patriots contingent in Germany last year, even though neither the Colts nor the Patriots were very good at the end of the year. So I went with the Bears for the reasons that you both enumerated. And I went with the Patriots because obviously they have a huge fan base and an international following from all of the Brady years. And I just think as many times as they can get the Patriots in front of a European audience, they're going to want to do it. And without Bill Belichick there to put the brake on it because it doesn't fit, his mantra, I think with a young coach and potentially a new GM, I think that this is a situation where they can coax them over and take advantage of their immense popularity.
They have marketed very well internationally, so I wouldn't be surprised. I went with similar thought process. I went with the Jets for mine. Bears, of course, we mentioned if there is an extra game, it would be that. I went with the Jets as well because I'm thinking Aaron Rodgers. I know when we go there, there's jerseys of every color and every team, but Green Bay is always represented very well, and I know Aaron's not there anymore, but I think some of that might carry over, so I think there's some pull there, so that's where I went with my choices on that.
There's a lot of optimism this year. There always is when you're dealing with the Jets. I mean, there are always people that seemingly nonsensically jump on board. I mean, you got a 40-year-old quarterback coming back with a bad Achilles, and yet I have seen people put the Jets at the very top of the AFC, so it would make sense to put the Jets in London.
It would. Now let's look ahead to primetime. So last year we had quite a few. We had Thursday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. Obviously the London games are technically primetime as well because they're the only games on. Where do we think they're going to end up here, John? I know you went with 2, I think, for yours.
Yeah.
Obviously, everyone's promised 1, and that includes Thursday.
Yeah, everyone's promised 1. I went with the Texans for the early reason. I think over the course of the next 5 years, this game will be on primetime twice at some point. It'll be a 4 o'clock. I think it's going to turn into the rivalry Brian's talking about. So if I looked at the schedule, it would seem logical that would be one they would consider. The Dolphins, both teams had winning records last year. I mean, the Jags 9-8, Dolphins like 11-6. It would make sense to get that on prime time. It was on prime time on a Thursday a few years back. The state rivalry thing might give it a little percentage edge over some other rivalry. Those 2 made a little bit of sense, but there's a bunch that could be.
Where'd you go with yours? Brian, I think you had a couple more.
Yeah, I think I had 3. I'm waiting for you to put them up because I've forgotten. I went with the Texans, and if they play a 4 o'clock game in Houston, then I would think this would be, maybe the season finale, something like that. Sure. I like the Dolphins for the same reason that you do. 2 teams with winning records in Florida. I mean, it could be a Thursday, it could be a Monday. There's lots of opportunities for that, and I think the Packers game could be a primetime game here. You've got an exciting young quarterback in Jordan Love, who pulled off a huge upset in the playoffs. And of course, the Packers are always a great draw in prime time. And the league likes quarterback matchups, and I think they're going to gamble and go back to Trevor Lawrence. They didn't have a lot of success in prime time last year, but I don't think that takes away. I think that would be an end of the season kind of thing because it'd be in the flex schedule with a small market like Jacksonville. But I could see all 3 of those.
I have one similar to you guys. I went with the Dolphins. I could definitely see that being like a Thursday, Monday night something just because of proximity and the records, as John mentioned. But then I strayed a little bit. We are going to Buffalo this season. Hopefully, if it's a primetime game, that is in the fall and not in January because I don't think that would be very fun. And then this is a little bit different. I think the Lions, primetime in the sense it's Thanksgiving. Wouldn't be in the evening, but it would be on Thanksgiving. The Jaguars are the only team to never have played on Thanksgiving.
Yep.
So if there's a chance, this is the year. I don't know if the league cares about that, but if they do, this would be the year to do it and play in Detroit on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that happens. I say good chance. I think there's a realistic chance that happens. I didn't put it on there because I just didn't really think that as a primetime game. If you think that's primetime, then absolutely, I think that could happen.
It's definitely primetime. If you're eating turkey and stuffing and you're watching football, I think
technically primetime is night. So
it's a marquee game, though.
Big time
marquee, yes. But I will go primetime for turkey at noon on Thursday.
Fair enough.
And besides just the lines, there's always the opportunity that a Jaguars game could be put on in that wild card Thursday night.
Sure.
Because they've not announced who the teams would be for that yet.
Yes. Let's look at what we think our regular season finale will be for this year, because that's all of us. That's kind of where I went with mine, in the sense of I didn't put this in my primetime necessarily, but I know kind of when they flexed that Titans game the other year at the end of the season, that's what I could see for the Texans game, because I think they always kind of want a division game at the end. You know, if it's going to decide the division, I think that matchup against the Texans is going to be a big one, and that's something I could see where they have the flex availability there to put that in a time frame when a lot of eyes can be on the TV.
Yeah, I went with the Colts because I think it'll be division. I kind of think they might get the Texans stuff out of the way. I think it could easily be the Texans. My only hesitancy with picking the Texans is I kind of wonder if the league doesn't sort of think that they're the favorites and might put them against somebody else if they thought that the end of last season meant Jacksonville is declining. I don't believe that, but sometimes that might play into play in how they schedule games.
I went with the Raiders just as a throwback. 20 years ago, the Jaguars went to Oakland to play the Raiders in the season finale with the playoffs on the line, and they got beat by a field goal at the end. So I just harken back to that and think, well, maybe they'll put the Raiders out there this year. We're guessing, so.
This is true. We are all guessing, and hopefully, if that is true, it's a different finish this time around.
Well, it's a different city.
That's true. All right, stay with us. We're going to come back and do Ozone Mailbag as we get all of our questions answered by John after the break.
And that's a Magellan first down.
Move the freight, move the freight, move the freight.
Would you like to control your own income? Work at Magellan Transport, voted the coolest office space in Duval. Bring your talents and let your career flourish. Visit their website at MagellanLogistics.com and apply online. Trust service. Trust Magellan.
Since 2014, there's been only one official home builder of the Jaguars, Dreamfinders Homes. With quality-built homes and a speedy move-in process, we're in 20-plus communities in the best locations across Northeast Florida. Dreamfinders Homes is everywhere you want to live. So get off the sidelines, Jags fans, and get into the game. Let Dreamfinders help you navigate your home purchase and offer great interest rates. Visit DreamfindersHomes.com for all your move-in ready homes and step up your game.
As the official supermarket of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Publix is helping fans gear up for game day with the limited-time Jaguars sub. Piled high with hot deli chicken tenders, boar's head bacon, cheddar cheese, coleslaw, and barbecue mayonnaise on a white sub roll. The Jaguars sub is an easy, delicious meal for any fan. Make it an ultimate game day by ordering the Jaguars sub online for in-store pickup. Publix, where shopping is a pleasure.
Jags fans, you can gear up at Fanatics.com with all the latest Jags styles. Shop now and get today's special offer at Fanatics.com. Officially licensed everything.
This broadcast is ozone friendly.
Ozone. Rolling on in. Love your caricature. Looks just like it.
Yeah, I guess it does.
We have some questions here this week. Interesting. I mean, we talked a little bit about this, but first question's from Sean. He wants to know, would you say the Jaguars have more depth than last year or about the same?
You know, it's hard to say. I guess they have a little more. Depth is such a weird thing in the NFL because if you get an injury or two at a particular position, then all of a sudden you don't have depth. It can be a perception thing, meaning, remember 2022, Brian, nobody thought they had any depth.
No.
And they were able to withstand two significant injuries in the offensive line and a couple in other places, and they were fine. Last year, everybody thought they had depth. They got 2 injuries at receiver and 1 at quarterback, and the season went down the tubes.
Yeah.
So it's really all about where you get injured in specific spots. I didn't really think that an injury to Christian Kirk would affect them that heavily, and it just seemed to waylay them. So, yes, I think they're deeper. I think they have good depth going in. I worry a little about some key players having a lot of miles on the tires, on the offensive and defensive line. But going into the season, I think it's a deep team. I think it's well constructed, even though they might add a player or two.
Well, last year, I think we thought that there was a lot of depth on the offensive line. There were certainly a lot of bodies. And then remember in Detroit, they lose Josh Wells, who was going to be that swing tackle for them. And it seemed like it unraveled from there. There were injuries with Cam. There were several injuries at left guard. And they never got any traction whatsoever. So it's easy to look and say, oh, yeah, we've got depth in the second week in May. But by the time you get to the start of the regular season, all of that depth is evaporated.
And clarify something. No team has the depth to withstand 2 or more injuries at a position. I mean, I say none. It's rare. It's very difficult to withstand a run on injuries at a position group, especially the secondary, because usually once an injury happens and you get 2, then all of a sudden it's Katie bar the door.
But there are a couple places, right, in the secondary with the 2 young corners they drafted. If one of those guys all of a sudden becomes a contributor, whether that's at nickel or having to take some significant time for an injury to Ronald Darby. And up front, right, if one of those 2 young defensive tackles has to work their way into a rotation that seems like it's got a lot of bodies, then you could have depth. But it's so tough to know with
But
those
the league
guys
is
yet.
set up so that they don't want teams to have depth.
Right.
That's what free agency is.
It's parity.
And we'll figure out a lot once the rookies get in here, too, about who's going to be of service to the team right away. Our second question about the offensive line as well. It's Paul from Lake City. He says, does a veteran center and a 4th rounder really change our line that much? I see a line that is 1 or 2 injuries away from being ineffective again. John, obviously we can't count for injuries, but is the line a lot different?
Yeah, this kind of plays into what I was saying before. Yeah, I think if Mitch Morse is better than Luke Fortner and you get interior solved, and remember, everybody talks about they didn't make enough changes. I think the team considers Ezra Cleveland a change. I don't think there's a belief that we saw the complete Ezra Cleveland experience last year.
The knee injury slowed him.
So that would be 2. If they get that interior offensive line fixed, and it's not, and you're able to run for a half a yard more a carry, then I do think the offensive line's better. In terms of if you get a couple injuries away, I would say this. Every team, ideally in the NFL, you want 7 or 8 good offensive linemen. Most teams have trouble finding 5. So, yes, they're probably an injury or 2 away from not being as good on the offensive line. There might be 2 or 3 teams in the league that aren't that way.
I think it's also important to mention you do want change. I think they definitely need to make change to that line, but you don't want 4 out of 5 new players on your offensive line. There is
it's not realistic to try to do that first. I mean,
correct.
What if the change is that Walker Little and Cam Robinson are both available for 16 games this year?
That's huge
right?
change.
I mean, that is change. Neither one of them were last year. So what if what you do in the offseason, the way that they train, the way that they change their diet, what if that's the change that keeps them on the field the entire time? And what if the young kid from Missouri all of a sudden looks like he's a guy that you could count on if there is an injury? So you've got 4 offensive tackles now, 2 of whom didn't play a full season, and Anton Harrison, who's coming off, he's probably the most consistent offensive lineman they had as a rookie. There's plenty of change. It just isn't all names and numbers.
And I think that's important to remember. It's a good point. Our final question for you, John, is from a fellow John. And he says, with the addition of Darnell Savage and Jarian Jones, how do you foresee Antonio Johnson's role in the upcoming season? It's tough to keep that production on the bench.
Yeah, it's hard right now. I think we'll know more in a couple of weeks. I'm not a big, hey, I look forward to OTA guy. But I think it will be interesting to see and maybe get some sort of a feel for how they're going to play the safety position. There's talk of Darnell Savage and Antonio Johnson playing, nickel, safety. Where does Dewey Wingard fit in? I don't really have a great feel yet for exactly where Antonio is going to line up. My sense from talking to people about this defense is that the safeties are all going to have roles, and there might be some switching back and forth between nickel and big safety and big nickel, So I think this is TBD, but he's going to have a role.
I think he's a starter. I think he with Andre Cisco will start, and then you'll see Darnell Savage playing with Jarian Jones or whoever the other nickel is going to be. I think his talent is too good and his potential is too high to put on the bench, and he takes Rayshon Jenkins' spot in the starting lineup.
It remains to be seen, but I think there'll be a lot of rotation on defense, especially if they're going to play run and gun as we've described. Playing man-to-man all day, you're going to need a lot of players in there to stay fresh and healthy. So it remains to be seen. Coming up after the break, we'll preview our rookie minicamp and what's coming up the rest of the week.
Jaguars fans are gearing up and saving big at Fanatics.com. The world's largest collection of officially licensed fan gear from all the leagues, teams, and Jaguars players you love. Shop the most trusted brands, exclusive designs by Fanatics, and autographed collectibles from today's biggest stars. Join Fanatics Rewards today and earn fan cash on every purchase. Shop now and get today's special offer. Fanatics.com. Officially licensed everything.
Daly's Dash is not only your Jaguars game day stop, but a great place to grab a meal any day of the week. To honor the Jags and the fans, we've crafted the Duval Sub. The Duval comes with freshly sliced turkey ham, melted cheddar and habanero jack cheese, topped with crisp lettuce, fresh tomatoes, and a double portion of our secret sauce, all served on a fresh roll. Come by your local's Daly's Dash today to get your delicious Duval Sub. Daly's is the official convenience store sponsor of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Over 40 years ago, I made a decision to help people. Might sound simple, but following your passion never is. Big ideas tend to get bigger. What started out as one lawyer's vision is now a team of over 400 with an obsession. Today, protecting you and your family is more than a job. It's a way of life. Over 40 years ago, we set out to build a law firm. It's clear now that what we've built is so much more. I'm Mehdi Farah, Jacksonville.
For me, it's about just completing my game. Going to my 4th year, it's kind of like, you think about like a senior year of high school. Like you're supposed to know what to do now. You're supposed to do everything right. You're supposed to show other guys. So I'm looking to be a leader, and just like I said, take the next step.
Caught up with the safety Andre Cisco entering his 4th season, final year of his contract, I believe, as well. So just talking a little bit about that, he's now kind of, after the movement we've seen in the defensive back room, he's more of a veteran presence this year.
Well, he and Tyson Campbell are the most tenured guys back there outside of Dewey. So, it is an important year for him. He has been very, very close to being very, very good at times. He's also got a step to take before he's what he wants to be. So I think it's a big year for him.
Cisco and Campbell, consistency, definitely going to be big for them. And staying injury-free, of course, as always. I know rookie minicamp, we don't get a ton out of that, but we will see them. They head into camp on Thursday, I believe. John, you just heading out and make sure everybody can run around and do what they need to do?
I exaggerate.
I know.
I say every year with these things, not to get worked up if you see media reports of this guy isn't what I thought he would be, this guy ran this wrong route, he didn't look the part, whatever. Just don't get too hyped up about little things that you see. But you do want to see guys that look like they belong, and that's what you're sort of going out there to see. Brian Thomas, does he look the part? You want guys to look the part, just don't get overly worried if they don't shine on the first 2 days that they're out there.
Brian, what are you looking forward to this week?
Nothing. Working minicamp is just from our perspective offers you nothing. It's all hype, and not to the coaches, not to the players.
True.
But it's
there's no conclusions to be
there's
drawn.
nothing. By the time we get to OTAs, no one remembers rookie minicamp. The only rookie minicamp I remember is 2015 because Dante Fowler Jr., the 3rd pick in the draft, popped his ACL in the first 10 minutes. And I thought, why are we out here with these guys? Going to get them hurt. They haven't been training for this. Now all of a sudden you go from training to run a 40 or bench, 225, however many times you can, to actually getting into pass rush drills. This doesn't make any sense. And they know that too. There's a fine line that they'll walk with these guys this week so that they are ready to come back for whatever offseason they're a part of and minicamp and be ready to go for training camp. So from that perspective, where it's all just about being smart and safe, what are we going to get from it?
That is the prime thing, staying safe, of course. We're going to hear from some of the coaches, the coordinators this week, I believe, as well, and perhaps Matt House as well, who has that LSU connection with all of our draft picks. Matt House. So stay with us. We'll check in with you next week and let you know all the things that go down here on Jags IM.